Hello everyone and welcome back to LewisFiction and welcome to the first film in the college trilogy for the Spectacular Spider-Man. This is the Spectacular Spider-Man and the Death of JEAN DEWOLFF. If you have not seen the previous 5 seasons and few movies leading up to this, make sure you go back and watch them before you watch this, or else this will make no sense, even though it is kind of a standalone thing. With that being said, let's get straight into this. We start our story with a backstory explaining JEAN DEWOLFF's history. Her mother resented her father as a child for being in the police force. However, JEAN saw it as heroic. JEAN always wanted to be like her father and looked up to him every single day. That is until he sadly passed away on the front lines, going out as a hero. This broke her mother, but JEAN saw this as an opportunity to step up to her father's shoes and take the mantle. She joined the police force a few years after a man known as George Stacy. They became quite close, as Stacy eventually ended up becoming the captain of the NYPD. It wasn't until a year later or so that George Stacy unfortunately passed away at the hands of falling rubble in a battle with Spider-Man, Carnage, and Venom. JEAN DEWOLFF would go on to resent Spider-Man for his death, but as she fulfilled her dream and stepped up to become the police captain, she started to work with Spider-Man more often, becoming extremely close with him and taking a liking to their friendship. And this is where our story begins, as we open with JEAN DEWOLFF's dead body stricken over her wooden floorboards with a bullet hole straight through her stomach in the cold dead of night. We cut to 6 hours earlier and to Peter. He is at frontline dropping pictures off for Robbie Robertson. Robbie thanks Peter as he says once again he has no idea how he gets great pictures of Spider-Man. Peter tells Robbie that he said before him and Spider-Man are kind of acquainted. Once again, it's obvious, just like in Season 5 and throughout the series as a whole, that Robbie has an inkling that there is more than meets the eye here with Peter. As Peter says that he's got to go, he has a play that he's been invited to tonight. Robbie says to send his love to the main star, and Peter says he will. Peter is swinging through the city frantically. Mary Jane's first college show starts in 10 minutes. MJ at the end of the series decided to go into acting school, and it's her first major performance, and Peter can't miss it. He has flowers in his hand which he is trying not to destroy through the gusting wind of the evening sky. Peter just about arrives outside the entrance to go into the theatre, and is just about changed into his suit as the doorman tells Peter to tuck his shirt in. However, police cars start to race past. Peter says that they can't be serious, as in classic Parker fashion, Peter has something to attend to as Spider-Man. Peter leaves the flowers at the door with a note saying to MJ Watson, "I had something on, love Pete." Spider-Man swings through the city heroically until we get our first major action set piece. A whole building is on fire and people are trapped inside. Spider-Man investigates as he rescues some people. Going back in to look for more, he finds a man in a hazmat suit staring straight back at him. Peter says he doesn't suppose he's the fire department, as the man sprays fire straight at him, Spider-Man dodging and bouncing back. Spider-Man asks, "Who the heck are you?" The man says he calls himself Butane. Spider-Man will say, "You'd think that after all these years, villains would start becoming more creative with their names." Butane and Spider-Man engage in battle, and it's a pretty easy win for Spider-Man. However, during their battle, the fire reached a gas canister stored away in the far corner of the house, which explodes, sending Butane and Spider-Man flying out of the house. Spider-Man's costume ripped and pride bruised. He stands up wounded as he looks around to see the chaos in the street and the panic. Sirens blurting and people hyperventilating. He looks to his right to see Butane on the floor, dead, in front of him. The explosion, killing him in the process. We cut to 30 minutes later, as JEAN DEWOLFF is on the scene talking to Spider-Man away from the crime scene. Stan Carter, JEAN DEWOLFF's partner, is also there. Spider-Man expresses his distaste in himself for what happened. Carter doesn't look impressed either, as he scowls at Spider-Man. JEAN DEWOLFF goes on to explain that Butane was a man called Jasper Ward. He was mentally ill. The house he burnt to the ground was his own. He'd spent a few years prior in an institution. He'd always sketch out drawings of him fighting Spider-Man. He believed himself to be a supervillain of yours, she will say. Peter places his head in his hands as he takes a deep sigh. Carter can't even look at Spider-Man, as DeWolf reassures him. She places her hand on Peter's shoulder and says she understands what he does for the city. She says you could have never known. You were just trying to do what's right. She'll tell him to chin up, as she tells Stan that they're leaving. We cut to MJ, who finishes the show, as she steps outside in front of the theatre to see flowers and a note. She picks it up and reads it, and she smiles as Spider-Man swings above her. We cut back to Peter in his apartment. It's small but homey. Since the end of Season 5, he has decked it out in some of his favourite movie posters and science equipment. There's even a sewing machine in the corner of the room with his Spider-Man costume half hanging out of. His heart still sank from the events that have just transpired. He decides to turn the TV on to try and take his mind off things, when he gets a report of the events that day. In some interviews with the citizens of New York, they call for Spider-Man to retire. Some even call for his arrest, stating that if he knew how to handle the situation properly, none of this would have happened, and Butane would still be alive. Of course, Peter could have done nothing about it, as he had no idea about the gas canister, but the public reception isn't looking good. On the surface, Spider-Man has no involvement with the public, other than a few frontline reports every few weeks. The TV cuts over to an interview with Stan Carter, JEAN DEWOLF's partner, as he says that he doesn't like Spider-Man, and he never has. He has to be registered as an official force by the US government and New York City Council, or retire, because things like today happen when you don't follow the books. Peter turns the TV off. It's all to do with Spider-Man, all to do with the events of today, and he just falls asleep, half hanging off his bed. He then wakes up the next day to see messages from both Robbie Robertson, his boss at Frontline, and MJ. He replies to MJ first, saying he's sorry he couldn't make it to her show last night. If she's been watching the news, she probably knows why. And then he opens Robbie's message to see him trying to get a hold of Peter multiple times. Peter says that Robbie doesn't usually message him that much unless something major has happened. Peter turns on the news to see the unfortunate news of the death of Captain JEAN DEWOLFF. Peter's eyes widened. He can't believe it. Peter swings his way over to the police station to see what's going on. However, on his way over, he catches glimpses of people rallying for the arrest and trial of Spider-Man. Peter thinks to himself that it probably isn't the smartest idea to show up at the police station at this moment in time with all this going on, especially since that Stan Carter is really against him. We cut to Stan Carter, however, who is sat in JEAN's office. The station is in chaos, but he is the only one that is calm. Someone enters the office and says he's wanted outside for an interview, and asks if they're going to give statements right now. At first, Carter says no, but then he stops the officer before they walked out of the office, and says he'll do it. Carter makes his way outside, and says the death of JEAN DEWOLFF is one that brings us much sadness, but we have to move forward, and catch whoever committed this crime. In the meantime, Carter doesn't want this to distract from the fact that they need to apprehend Spider-Man, and as police captain, his main mission is to get him arrested. Spider-Man will be brought to justice for his actions. Carter thanks the media as he heads back inside. Instead of confronting Carter and the police force himself, Spider-Man heads directly to JEAN DEWOLF's apartment to check it out for himself. He needs to find clues as to who did this. The room is dark, as all the lights are turned off. The only light that entered the room was through a beam of sunlight that would occasionally be blocked by clouds. He gets into the apartment through the window, only for a spine-chilling sensation to be sent through his body. Someone else is already here, he feels. Spider-Sense. Spider-Man jumps out of the way as an extended billy club penetrates the wall next to him. Spider-Man will look up as he sees the weapon in the wall. He quickly turns his head to the side as a man's foot extended his way, kicking Spider-Man in the chest. Spider-Man tries to fight back, but the man is too fast, too experienced in hand-to-hand combat. Peter uses his spider-sense to power through, though, as he starts to manage to dodge the man's attacks. However, the man walks through the beam of sunlight. Peter could clearly see who it was. A man dressed in a full red costume, small horns on the top, only with his mouth not covered, and the letter D printed on the front of the costume. Peter asks, "Who are you meant to be?" as the man stops in his tracks. He pulls the billy club out of the wall, and says he shouldn't have sneaked up on him like that. Spider-Man is confused and asks, "Who is he?" The man says that's not what's important. The man goes on to tell Spider-Man that he shouldn't be here. He's not exactly got the best public reception at the moment. Spider-Man asks, what is he? Some kind of vigilante? Because that's his thing. The man responds with saying that, I guess you could say that. Spider-Man will ask the man how come they've never crossed paths before, and the man tells him that he works from the lower streets of Hell's Kitchen, and isn't as glamorized in the media as him. He says he usually works on petty theft, but this is something that involved him. Spider-Man feels slightly offended. He says he isn't glamorized. The man tells Spider-Man that he tries to stay out of the spotlight, but I guess his red and blue costume doesn't help him. Spider-Man asks, what do I call you? And the man says Daredevil. Spider-Man scoffs and says that's stupid. Daredevil responds by saying Spider-Man is better. Spider-Man shrugs it off and says true. As they both search the apartment, Spider-Man asks how Daredevil got wrapped up in all this. Daredevil goes on to explain that a judge he worked with closely got murdered in the same manner. There were no leads, only that his ID badge to show that he was a New York City judge was missing from his body and his uniform. Daredevil has reason to believe that these murders are connected. Daredevil goes on to say that the judge he worked with was actually a big fan of Spider-Man. Spider-Man will say he's blushing. Spider-Man says that he's never worked with anyone before. Maybe them teaming up could make this mystery a whole lot easier. Daredevil says that he works alone. He kneels down and sniffs. He picks up on a scent. Spider-Man asks, what is he doing? Daredevil says he's picked up on something. Spider-Man says, don't tell me your superpowers are a super sense of smell, because that would be really cool but also really lame at the same time. Daredevil says they're not. He just has heightened senses, not a superpower. Spider-Man, confused, just rolls with it. Spider-Man sees into DeWolf's bedroom as he keeps on investigating. He sees her uniform and some police gear hanging off the back of the chair. When he notices the badge is gone, Spider-Man thinks back to what Daredevil said and calls him into the room. Daredevil says his suspicions were correct. He didn't think it was a coincidence that he picked up on the same scent at both crime scenes. Daredevil looked over to Spider-Man and thanks him for his help, but he should take it from here. Spider-Man points his finger and says he's a veteran in this game now. He isn't going to step aside when a criminal needs to be brought in. Daredevil tells Spider-Man that this goes deeper than some murders. He points the finger back at Spider-Man, saying that if he's seen hanging around crime scenes like this, it isn't going to make his case with the public any easier. Daredevil says trust him. Spider-Man says, what are you, some kind of lawyer? Daredevil says, you could say that. In reassurance, Daredevil says he's done a good job, and he doesn't believe what the public is saying about him, but he really, really should step aside. And with that, Spider-Man swings off into the distance. As he swings through the city, doubts run through his head. Is he good enough? What if his reputation with the city is never repaired? What if he can't build that trust back again? Spider-Man arrives back at his apartment. He sits down on his bed when he gets a message from MJ asking if he wants to hang out. Peter says yes. We cut to them both on a date. Peter apologizes for not being at the show, and MJ says it's okay. She's got plenty of more performances in the next few weeks that he can come to. MJ asks Peter if he's doing okay. It's been pretty rough as Spider-Man recently. Peter says yeah. He's just concerned that he can never recover his trust with the city. After May's death, he just tried to do his best. The best Spider-Man he could possibly be. But he's letting them down. He's letting May down. MJ will tell him that's not true, and to give it time. Peter holds his head down, but she lifts it back up. Peter sighs and asks if they can just have a normal night. No Spider-Man, no crime, no nothing. Just them two. MJ says of course they can, as she wraps his arms around him, and they kiss each other. MJ says that they should catch a movie and grab Italian food. Peter says that sounds like a perfect night. After their date ends, they head back to Peter's apartment. They sit down on the end of the bed, opposite the TV, as Peter falls asleep on MJ's shoulder. She strokes his hair as the TV blurts out for Spider-Man's arrest once again. She will look down at him as she says only if they knew how much you cared. MJ then sees a text message from Robbie on Peter's phone. She thinks that's odd, his boss wouldn't be messaging him at this time of night. When she checks, it's a message saying for Peter to contact Spider-Man and tell him to come to the frontline offices immediately, ASAP, it's an emergency. MJ shakes Peter's head. As he wakes up, MJ tells Peter that Robbie's in trouble. Peter checks his phone and tells MJ to stay here. He'll be right back. Spider-Man swings out the window towards Frontline dramatically. We cut to Robbie, who is hiding under a table in the offices at Frontline. He is shaken up by something as we see bullet holes through the glass window beside him. We then hear footsteps gradually approach him. A head peeks around the corner, and it's Spider-Man. Robbie breathes a sigh of relief. Spider-Man asks if he's okay. Peter told him that he was in trouble. Robbie explains the situation. A man is in this building. He came up through the stairs and shot at him as he was about to make his way home. Robbie ran through the offices and hid here. Spider-Man asks if he saw him leave. Robbie says no. Then Spider-Sense. Peter pushes Robbie out of the way as Spider-Man takes a bullet straight to the shoulder. A man stands at the other end of the corridor. As Peter webs the gun out of his hand, Spider-Man tries to web the man, but he dodges and hides in the shadows. And then out of nowhere, Daredevil drops from the shadows and engages in battle with the man in the purple mask. However, the man is trained in combat, as Daredevil couldn't get the upper hand. Spider-Man tries to web him again, and then Daredevil steps in front of him and in his way. They end up tripping over each other, allowing for the man to escape. Spider-Man shouts towards Daredevil that he had that covered. Daredevil turns around saying, I thought I told you to stay out of this. Spider-Man asks, where did you come from anyway? Daredevil says that he's been tracking him for the last few hours and he tracked him here. He almost got him, but now you got in my way. Spider-Man says I could say the same thing about you. After the argument cools down, they both check up on Robbie and see if he's okay. Spider-Man is bleeding as Robbie ties something around his shoulder. Spider-Man thanks Robbie. Daredevil takes a sigh. He says they can't keep getting in each other's way. It's clear they're both not going to give up, and to truce. He offers his hand out to Spider-Man, and he takes it, saying truce. They'll work together from here. Daredevil asks Robbie what he wanted with him, and Robbie says that he's not so sure. That's when a newspaper catches the corner of Daredevil's eye. A positive piece on Spider-Man, defending him despite all the calls for his arrest. Daredevil asks Robbie if he's pro-Spider-Man, if Frontline is a pro-Spider-Man company. Robbie says, yeah, we post positive stories about Spider-Man, and he asks why. Daredevil turns to Spider-Man and says, the connection is you. Spider-Man looks confused. As Daredevil tells Spider-Man that all the people that have died all support you. JEAN DEWOLFF, captain of the NYPD, in a position of power and supporter of Spider-Man. The judge, massive position of power with the legal system and supporter of Spider-Man. Robbie has a massive influence through his news company and is pro-Spider-Man. Spider-Man will say that doesn't really narrow it down though, because the suspect could be anyone, as everyone is kind of on his back at the moment. Daredevil goes on to say that that will help determine who the next victim might be, as he walks over to the gun that was webbed off the man. He picks it up and wipes Spider-Man's web off it and analyzes it. The NYPD, Daredevil will say. This is an NYPD gun. It's an inside job, he will think to himself. Peter, however, thinks about what Daredevil said before about the connection between the victims, and that's when he realizes. The next victim. It's himself. Not Spider-Man, but Peter Parker. He's the only one who takes clear photos of Spider-Man in the whole city and publishes them to a pro-Spider-Man news source. MJ, Spider-Man will think to himself. The man is probably heading to Peter's right now. Peter will swing off into the distance, as Daredevil will follow. Spider-Man gets back to his apartment, and no sign of MJ. He starts to freak out, as Daredevil also arrives on the scene. Daredevil says, "So this Peter Parker guy, he takes photos of you?" Spider-Man says yes, and his girlfriend is missing. Spider-Man will say he's taken her. He's taken her to lead Parker out. Daredevil says yes. The same man that they encountered at Frontline has been here. His scent is all over the place. They both head over to the police station. Everyone has head home for the night. Spider-Man asks, what are they doing here while MJ is missing? Daredevil says it's an inside job, right? Spider-Man says he doesn't know. Daredevil says he's sure it is. And with that information, they are sure to find evidence here. He tells Spider-Man to start searching the lockers. As he does, he comes across JEAN DeWolff's locker and sees messages in it celebrating her life and her service to the police force. Spider-Man looks down slightly, remembering his time working with her. He searches a few more until he reaches Stan Carter's locker and opens it. Peter crouches down, when underneath some of the clothes, he finds the judge's ID badge and JEAN DeWolff's police badge. He calls Daredevil over saying he thinks he's found their mystery killer. Daredevil smirks as the scent matches the locker's odor. We cut to Stan Carter's apartment as MJ is tied up in the corner. MJ asks what the hell he wants with her, and he says he wants her boyfriend, Peter Parker. MJ asks who is he? He turns around and he says to call him the Sin-Eater. MJ asks what has Peter done to him, and Sin-Eater screams back saying no more questions. MJ flinches slightly as she slowly tries to untie herself from the back of the chair. She's been in situations like this before. None of this is new to her. And when the Sin-Eater wasn't looking, she manages to break free and whack him round the back of the head as hard as she could. However, the Sin-Eater gets back up and grabs her, detaining her. But before a fight could properly break out, Spider-Man and Daredevil arrive through the window. Spider-Man shouts to get his hands off her, but the Sin-Eater pulls out a gun and points it at MJ's head. He laughs as he says it's over for him. Spider-Man tells Carter to put the gun down. They know it's him. Daredevil cautiously waits, not to take another step, listening very closely. Stan will ask how they found out. Spider-Man says that doesn't matter. He has to give it up. Carter shouts, saying that he ruined this city. Everything he stands for has ruined this city. George Stacy, dead because of him. May Parker, dead because of him. Jasper Ward, dead because of him. Everyone dies because of him, and it's time he and anyone that supports him was brought to justice, to cleanse this world of Spider-Man, to cleanse New York City for good. MJ quivers as Carter's grip on the gun gets tighter. Carter says the only way he lets her go is if Spider-Man hands himself over. Spider-Man holds his hands up and kneels down and says he's all his. Carter releases MJ as Daredevil steps in and pulls her to one side, still carefully listening to the sounds around him. Carter has his gun pointed directly at Spider-Man's head. He says he's fast, but not faster than a bullet, so he wouldn't try anything if he were them. He says it's time, finally, for him to die. MJ screams, but Daredevil smiles as Carter pulls the trigger, but nothing. There are no bullets in the gun. It's not even loaded. Daredevil extends his arm and whacks Carter with his billy club, knocking him out. Spider-Man looks up as MJ hugs him. Spider-Man asks, how did you know? Daredevil could hear the echo within the gun's barrel. This whole time he was listening as Carter stumbled around the room, listening for the echoes within the gun. The sound frequencies indicated to no bullets. It wasn't even loaded the whole time. Some police captain he was, Spider-Man will say. The police will arrive on the scene as Stan Carter is arrested. Daredevil says it was nice working with Spider-Man as he shakes his hand. Spider-Man said that they should do this more often. Daredevil says he wants to keep out the spotlight, but if their paths cross again, he'll be more than willing to work with him. Daredevil tells Spider-Man that he should make amends with the city. Spider-Man says he doesn't know how to. Daredevil says, get more involved. Show New York that you're one of them, not above them. He says, good luck, Peter, as he leaves. Spider-Man says, wait, how the heck did you know? Of course he knows, Peter will say to himself. We cut to the final couple of scenes, where Peter designs an app where people can report crimes and general inconveniences that Spider-Man can help with, helping him getting more involved with the city, making him feel more a part of it. We get a montage of scenes of people using the app, and Spider-Man going to help them. He helps a cat out of a tree, talks to a little kid reassuring him after his dog went missing, and even helps an old lady cross the street. Spider-Man becomes more humane in the eyes of the city, rather than a glamorous superhero. His reputation is repaired, and Spider-Man is one with New York, more than ever before. And as the character realizes, and as the audience realizes as well, that it's not just about being a vigilante which makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. It's about who he is as a person. It's about the responsibility to help everyone and anyone, no matter what the inconvenience. And with that, we end our first film in the College Trilogy here. Thank you for watching Spider-Man and the Death of Jean DeWolff. This is the first part in the College Trilogy. Obviously, the next part is coming very soon, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. With that being said, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care, and peace.